like a guy named Phobos is a threat. Like, girl, dump him. His name is Phobos. If you're a man named Phobos, you single to me.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2024, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed Dark Universe cinematic universe, one pitch at a time. I am one of your hosts, Dalton DeShane.
And I am your host whose fault this is, Dylan Roth.
Welcome back. For you, it has been 1 week. For us, it has been about 20 minutes where Dylan caught me up on the latest WrestleMania drama.
It's so fucking wild.
We are here for part 2 of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. When we last left our heroes, we had met the Dark Universe version of Quasimodo, who it turns out is Victor Frankenstein's son, William, who he murdered, now resurrected. And who has joined some sort of religious warrior cult that we will learn more about, which has Esmeralda among its ranks. And Quasimodo is out for revenge against his father. We don't know why he's called Quasimodo yet.
We'll get there.
Okay. I figured we
would.
Well,
kind of. Actually, we don't ever fully explain what Quasimodo means. It means half-formed.
Okay.
But we do, the name change is referenced later on.
Quasimodo's out for revenge against his father. He broke in and tried to kill Victor, but Victor sort of was like, hey, I'm sorry that I killed you 200 years ago. And Quasimodo had some feelings and fled.
It would be weird if you've been plotting somebody's death for a long period of time and you show up and they're like, hey, my bad.
Yeah.
Like,
oops.
It would be confusing emotionally.
Yeah. It's understandable. That's his dad, sort of. Yeah, well, we're finally going to find out who was in the bathroom.
Who was in the
bathroom? That is the question on everybody's mind. Before we get back into the movie, I figured since we had a little bit of extra time, since we have split this into 2 episodes, we could talk a little bit about our opposing creative processes and how that leads to something like a 2-part episode. Because Dylan and I have very different ways of approaching our script writing.
We write so differently.
Which
I think really works out when we're writing together. I think it's one of the reasons why our Dark Legion scripts, I think, are among our best.
Yes.
But you, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
You come up with an outline for your story. You beat out your story before you start writing a script, which is what would be considered the probably practical and economical with your time way to do it.
Yeah.
If you do not imagine that it's just going to spiral out of control.
The first part of my writing process is sort of like solving a Rubik's Cube in my head, where it's like I can start with a few basic colors where like I'll know like big moments I want to hit. Like for Native American Werewolf, I'm like, she needs to have like the biggest wolf out ever in the 3rd act. Like I need to really land this. The Native American heritage needs to matter. Okay. Well, what about if those 2 things connect this way? Okay. And I'm constantly just sort of thinking of an idea and immediately vetting it. Like, no, that's not interesting. That's not interesting. That's not interesting to me. Oh, this is something that feels right. Okay. So then where does that lead me? And sort of I'm shifting all these pieces around and drawing lines between them until I'm like, okay, so this is what the movie's about. This is the arc. Here are and then at this point, my mind is just going on its own. And I couldn't figure it out while writing because my writing is too slow. Like my brain just moves too fast when it comes with coming up with the ideas. And I end up with this big, connect the dots. And then it's just like, okay, now I have to color it in, but I think where that helps me as far as the structure of our podcast goes is because I know what the story is before I sit down. I'm like, okay, here's what's going to really matter. Let's just write the scenes that are really going to either emotionally help set this up or plot-wise set this up. And everything else, these subplots aren't really going to be prove to be important and stuff like that. And I can keep it within this like 60-page-ish framework. And that's nice when we're doing these pitches. But
sure. Now,
that's not to say your method is bad.
No, my method is stupid, but I think it's worked. It's served me well, which is, for me, it really starts with, okay, who are my characters and what do they want? What are the relationships?
You do the Stephen King method. This is how Stephen King writes his novels.
Well, I mean, Stephen King's On Writing is one of the major seminal texts for me.
Yeah.
Like reading that helped me determine what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I know I've just broken kayfabe by admitting that I've read a book.
Oh, yeah.
But,
you have read On Writing.
On Writing, I read it when I was a junior in high school. And
you read a book about writing books that you haven't read.
Yes. I've actually read some Stephen King, too,
okay.
while we're dropping the mask. But I like letting the characters lead me.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually leads to me deciding on a sort of theme or an idea. And I will kind of let them run for a while. And then if I hit a wall where I realize something's not working, I will prune it, go back to where it was working, start from there, and keep going until I hit a spot where it doesn't work anymore, prune there. And the later I get in the story, the less I'm pruning and the more I'm backfilling.
Yeah.
Once I realize, okay, here's what this character really wants. Here's where they're going. I have to make that. There's a place earlier on where I can make that, like, where I can create an expectation or I can rehearse something.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back and I'll backfill. Like I said, the first draft of the first act took me half of the time that I had to work on the script. I didn't start writing immediately because it took me a while as I was watching the movie, the original Universal movie, and I was like looking through different texts and learning more about the history of the building and trying to also learn more about what the point of the novel was without having to read that fucking brick.
How long is it?
It's a Victor Hugo novel. It's big. I don't actually know if it's big. I know his reputation. But here's what I know about the novel that interested me at first. The novel is not called The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The novel is called Notre Dame de Paris. It is the building symbolically that is the center of the story, not Quasimodo. It is sort of a societal melodrama where you have a lot of stuff going on with a lot of different characters. It's really more about the place. And I thought about going that direction for a while, and there was a point in this where it was a sprawling fucking...
Oh, yeah, it is 940 pages in 3 volumes.
See, I didn't make that shit up. This movie almost had a Magnolia structure where it was going to follow, we're going to have a Victor and Cassie story. We're going to have a Quasimodo and Esmeralda story. We're going to have all these other things happening. And there was going to be a spine of it. My trouble was that I could not find the spine of it, for the life of me. I had 3 different versions of who Quasimodo was. And I feel bad that I didn't mention this on the first one because I am going to contact him privately at some point before this episode airs and then before the first one airs too. But I owe, from the Discord, executive producer Dick Wolf, Justin Carter, big time because I kept waffling on what Quasimodo's deal was.
Yeah.
And this is, I avoid looking at the sort of expectation stuff, which we usually try to wait until after everything's fully formed.
Yeah.
When the time we put that call out, I was in the middle of writing the 3rd act anyway.
Yeah.
But a while back, I just got a notification where Justin Carter's I think it would be cool if Caroline made the Hunchback. And that was sort of in one of the directions I was thinking, but I have to give we joke that if we use your ideas, we're not going to credit you, but of course we are.
Yeah.
This is so integral to the final product that I made that I think that maybe even on the, I'll talk to him, and maybe even on the title card of the episode, we will have a shared story credit for Justin Carter
but it seems Caroline didn't create the Hunchback.
We're going to get there.
Okay.
I guess that's
Frollo
why
did.
I guess that's why I didn't mention it last time.
Yeah.
We will talk more about that.
Okay.
Have I just spoiled something? Is that no good?
I don't know. I was under the impression that Frollo created the Hunchback in the prologue 5 years ago.
We're going to clarify some of this.
Okay.
But yeah, so the idea of what the Hunchback was for a while he wasn't going to be a supernatural figure. Then there was a period of time where he was not going to be a supernatural figure, but he was going to be told that he was. Frollo was going to pitch him as a Hellboy type, which he may or may not actually be. And it might just be, some guy with some weird body construction that he's manipulating. That didn't really hold weight. That didn't work. I wanted him to maybe be somebody had reproduced Caroline's work in the future, an element which I did use.
Yes.
And it could just not come together. I was also trying to deal with the Caroline stuff. And then you reminded me that he has a son. And I went back and read that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I got all these pieces here. I have the family stuff. I have the monster stuff. I have the Frollo stuff from the book. And And then there was like the angle where like, okay, so much of the novel and the original movie has to do with the sexual obsession that everybody has over Esmeralda. Is that going to be the center of my movie? There's a point in the story where she's a stripper that everybody wants to fuck. There's so many different versions of this story. There was going to be a thing where like we were going to be following her and she wanted to be a dancer at the Moulin Rouge, but she's moonlighting there trying to show that she's an illegal immigrant, so they won't hire her. Meanwhile, she's stripping, but she's using her the peak hours that she could be spending making money dancing, working as a seamstress at the place where she really wants to work that is never going to hire her. And it was going to be about like the plight of being an illegal immigrant in France, right? Yeah. I had like 16 pages of that. It's gone now.
Yep. So people in the Discord did predict, I didn't share this, but a lot of stuff about like refugees and immigrants in France and like being a commentary on that stuff.
Because there's a lot of that in the original movie and in the book as well, where there's a story of this this group that is the name of the neighborhood, it translates to Court of Miracles. Yeah. And the reason it's called that is that all of the beggars on the street who are blind or disabled in some way, they go home and suddenly they can see and they can walk because they're trying to elicit sympathy. I wasn't going to use that take.
Yeah.
Instead, I had it be a spy thing. You know?
It sounds like it's like the Court of Owls.
I mean,
cool.
That's a cool comic book name.
Yeah.
But the point is that I start with an idea. The dinner scene was always there.
You have to work your ideas out longhand, it seems like.
Exactly.
Like you really have to you have to chase them down until they don't work anymore.
Yes. I know what characters want out of a scene and the idea that someone's going to get it, but I don't know what happens until I get to the end. And I have a general cardinal direction to navigate to. But in almost every one of the scripts that I've read to you on this show, somebody who I thought was going to make it to the end of the script dies. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just how it works for me, is I'll get to a point and be like, nope, they got to go. So what if I had 2 more movies planned for them? They're out.
Yeah.
That's just how I would rather not bend over backwards to solve the puzzle. I'd rather tell the story that's in front of me.
Sure.
And sometimes that means that you write 60 pages in a frenzy over the course of 48 hours.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
And now I think everything you've done is really working. Like I think you found the right story. This everything's been really good. There is like, if we had another 2 weeks, I'm sure you would have found more stuff to cut. Because I think, especially because you find things out in the scene, you really write the scene.
Yeah.
Like every little detail, because you don't know what details are going to matter.
That's right.
But then, like, when we were doing the dinner scene, I was noticing, like, oh, there's a lot of, like, busy work here that's like, yeah, we would see on the screen, but I don't know if this is actually going to matter to the story, that, like, maybe for the sake of the pitch going back through, you could be like,
yeah, like, we can maybe get rid of it.
Not the whole dinner scene. I'm just saying, like, there's, like, a handful of sentences that'll be about like the people at the table next to them. And it's like, okay, in the long term, maybe this isn't going to.
No, I think that does, because we're talking about raising the suspicion around them in the room. And so when something happens, everybody's ready to go fucking boom.
Sure.
But originally, that's true that there was less of a transgression at the dinner at some point. It was going to more be about how people weren't happy with them being there. And that was when the movie was going to be more about the idea of dealing with being a social outcast, particularly when they know that in a few months' time they're going to be famous.
Yeah.
And the frustration of waiting for their time to come. These are all things that were at some point maybe going to be part of the story. And as it worked out, like the beginning of the dinner scene was always there. It had 3 different endings. Yeah. Anyway, that's why the script's so fucking long. And I love writing this way, and I have a really hard time not writing this way. And especially since this podcast is not a profit center for me, I am disinclined to change my method. I also just love the music of dialogue, and I'm very particular about it. Dalton could tell you that I put a lot more punctuation in my dialogue than I probably should, because I have an idea of exactly what the rhythm of it should be, and I want that followed. I'm Sorkin-esque in that way. I also love cocaine. I love it.
You do. God, I can't imagine you on cocaine.
No, I should never do cocaine. I actually have a friend who has explicitly banned me preemptively from ever doing cocaine.
Second that, yeah.
Yeah, like
if you're listening to this podcast, can you?
Because sometimes there will be an event where somebody will be like, come on.
I feel like
let Dylan have cocaine, and this person will be like, no. Not on my dime.
I feel like we need to actually add a disclaimer at the front of every episode specifying that you are not on cocaine.
I do not do cocaine. Yeah. No. I have never done cocaine, and it's because who the fuck wants to see me on cocaine?
That would be insane.
Also, as we've established, I'm very congested. I wouldn't get my money's worth.
I think what we were, what I was getting at with the dinner scene is that I think we end up putting the same amount of story in our stories. It's just yours ends up being 80 pages, where maybe there could be a past that is 60 pages. But that's just not the way the writing happens.
Yeah.
And as a result, I'm not saying that makes the story bad. I'm just talking about the structure of the podcast.
Sure.
Like, the details that are there are good. Like, everything that is here, like, you really take your time with your act one, and it sets up a lot of really a lot of color and a lot of emotion and a lot of snappy dialogue that helps with the characters and stuff. There's nothing there that's bad. Just as we get into our second episode, I was listening and being like, okay, this in a world, this could have been one episode, but because of the time restraints, you only had 4 weeks and you wrote most of this in the last 48 hours.
If I'd had more
it
time,
ends up being a two-parter.
For your benefit, Dalton, I would have tried to trim it down. I did cut at least one scene, and actually a subplot that I was going to try and weave into the third act that is gone that we can talk about later.
A subplot in the third act.
One that I never found a place for and never figured out the shape of it was going to be. But if I were to make it into a full-length feature script, I am desperate to put in. So we'll see. We can talk about it later.
There's one aspect of our Frankenstein series that we have not touched on, which is the actual Bride of Frankenstein, Gwendolyn Christie.
Yeah.
Revealed in the post-credit scene of The Bride and Frankenstein. I'm guessing we're not going to see her.
This is where we run into a little bit of the Taika Waititi / I guess, I even hate to say it, Rise of Skywalker problem. Because I think in general, I've been pretty good about making this a sequel to both of your films.
Well, I think
I have really no interest in Elsa as a character.
Think it's not even so much a Rise of Skywalker thing, because that was purposefully done as a post-credit scene. I think this is kind of a general, especially like an MCU Phase 4 and 5 thing, where like they introduce things in the post-credit scene that then never get followed up on.
Yeah, Star Fox. Where's that dude at?
I don't know. But like, I think it is interesting that she is still out there and is Cassie's sister. There could maybe even be in a full version of this, if we wanted to go full Dark Legion mode on this, like there could be a version where William and Gwendolyn Christie, Elsa, team up because they're both spurned, family members, like, and it could be really a Cassie story as much as a Victor story.
Well, but hey, I've got a document in my phone called Dark Legion Revenge Squad. Where I just keep a list of characters who have grudges.
There we go.
So
our Thunderbolt.
She's on there.
Yeah.
No use for her here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to all the folks who want more of that character. I had nothing for her. It's not like I forgot she existed. I had just no interest.
It was to give us more material to follow up on, but
sure, and we still might.
And Hunchback wasn't locked in at that point, so we might have just been doing Frankenstein 3.
Yeah,
in which case maybe she would have come back. But the fact that we had to focus on a Hunchback kind of took up all the air in the room.
There was way more meat on the bone from that first movie for me to play with, and I didn't really feel like revisiting that character.
Well, and it sounds like a lot of fans probably would rather you revisit the first one of those Frankenstein movies anyway. I maintain that Bride and Frankenstein is one of my favorite pitches.
Dalton, I
had a lot of fun with it. I love all those characters, but I think you did the right thing. And who knows, maybe I'll have something for Elsa Falk to do later on.
Maybe.
I mean, look, she's played by Gwendolyn Christie, and I said this phase was going to be for the lesbians.
Right, so she has to be in Van Helsing.
I mean, I guess so. I got to give the lesbians what they want. I've promised them too much. But that's enough preamble. Let's get back.
If you're a straight woman who listens to this podcast, this is not a come on of any kind. I'm just curious if there are any.
Yes. If you are
make yourselves heard, your voices matter too.
If you are a Kinsey 1 woman right? 1 is the straight end of the spectrum, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember which end of the Kinsey spectrum is straight, but if you're, or a Kinsey 0 maybe.
A big shout out to my sister, one of the 3 straight women I know in my life.
Let us know if you ain't gay, because we assume the rest of you are.
The loudest of our fan bases have made it very clear.
You are gay and trans.
Yes.
And we love you.
Yes.
But straight people are welcome too. Straight and cis people, you're allowed to listen. I mean, Dylan is one of you.
Yes. You'll always have an ally on this podcast in me.
Yes. You deserve, representation on screen, I guess.
Yeah, this is my so far my one like entirely textually straight film.
Oh man, so you're not gonna give us the twist that Cassie is bisexual? You should have given Cassie the same moment where she goes,
no, I am bisexual. But listen, in a version of this where we do talk about where like I wanted to have a scene at some point where Gwen is like tells to Cassie being like, okay, no, seriously though. What is going on? Because like she would eventually ask me like, you have 2 separate bedrooms and mine is between them and I never hear anything. What the fuck is going on?
I mean, that's what I'm wondering too.
Well, I thought about having a scene where, because we have Gwen at some point talking about how she hasn't been interested in having any sex lately. And then Cassie making a remark being like, you have no idea how long it's been for me. And she's like, it hasn't? You're not? What is going on? Like, and these are all scenes that I almost even started writing and I'm like, there's no room for this, especially if I'm trying not to have a bunch of extraneous shit. But now it's on the show.
They can be platonic life partners. Yeah. That's a thing.
That's kind of how I see it. Again,
asexual people exist.
Yeah, I mean, it's not text yet, and I don't think that I don't write Cassie in this particular way. I don't have any really read on Victor's sexuality other than he was very in love with his wife.
Asexuals are the one part of the alphabet spectrum we do not represent yet on this show.
Not yet.
So maybe, they have an asexual marriage.
And again, not explicitly, right? It's also very easy for like asexual characters to kind of be under the radar and not be necessarily dancing around and saying, I'm asexual, because it comes up less, right? It is...
Victor's not a gray ace, he's a green ace.
Anyway, I mean, we're 20 minutes now into episode 2.
Well, yeah, but we have less ground to cover this time, and
we do.
The last one had a 20-minute intro. But yes, you all want to know who's in the bathroom, so let's get back.
This joke's a week old for the people listening now.
They've been making it in the Discord all week. All right, let's jump back into the script. This is the second half of Act 2. I've had a lot of coffee. I'm having a second cup of coffee during this recording, so
Woo!
I might talk faster than Dylan.
Impossible. I'll just talk faster. Castle Frankenstein, 1825. The creature Victor Frankenstein has escaped. Caroline kneels over the broken, lifeless body of her brother William. Rain pours in from the open roof above. She wipes away a tear, then lifts William's body onto the bloody operating table. In the present day, Quasimodo sits on a bed in the Court of Miracles medical bay, getting one of his shoulders set back into place. When the medic is done, Frollo approaches him. They sign.
What happened?
I was caught off guard. He had me. He could have killed me, and he didn't.
He has killed you once already.
I know. I remember feeling the life being squeezed out of me, unable to even beg for my life as the thing brutalized me. I remember looking into those eyes and seeing nothing but hate and fury, and all I've wanted since the day I woke up was to make him pay for what he did to me. But this time he seemed more like the father I remember. It was shocking seeing him again. For however much he might still deserve to die, in that moment I didn't want to be angry anymore. I just wanted my father back. The father who raised me, the father who built me a library and taught me to play chess.
He was also the father who hid you away in his castle out of shame.
Yes, not at all like you. Frollo explodes, yelling as he signs.
He ripped you apart. I put you back together.
My sister put me back together.
And when she beheld the creature she had created, she took you apart again and buried you for 200 years. I gave you life.
Frollo calms himself. The medical staff pretends not to have noticed his outburst.
There's a twist. Unfortunately, regulations are quite clear regarding insubordination. You are to be relieved of duty and confined to quarters pending tribunal.
Quasi bows his head and Frollo exits. We pull back to see that Esmeralda has been watching this conversation from afar. At the house, Victor and Cassie sit across from each other in the living room.
I had no idea who he was, or who I was. My body had been reanimated without my soul, and they would not be reunited for another decade when my Elizabeth and I were briefly reunited.
So really you didn't kill him? I mean, you weren't you when you did it.
No, but I remember doing it. I remember all of them. So many innocents. Children.
Cassie recoils. It hurts that you kept this from me after everything we've been through together.
I'm sorry. I didn't want you to look at me the way others do.
Hope your apology to William was better. Before Victor can respond, the front door clicks open. It's Gwen, soaking wet and looking exhausted. What happened to you? Caught in the rain. I'm gonna go shower. She heads for the bathroom. No, wait! She's only opened the door an inch when suddenly Victor is there, slamming it shut again.
Oh, we're about to find out.
What the hell?
Pipe burst. Huge mess. Use the upstairs shower.
Gwen and Victor look at each other, each of them knowing the other is lying about their day. Suddenly there's a thump noise from inside the bathroom and a barely audible murmur of a voice. But Gwen doesn't push. Got it. She goes upstairs. Victor and Cassie exchange a frantic look. They carefully open the door, and inside, Esmeralda is pulling a shard of window glass out of her thigh.
Ooh, it was Esmeralda in the bathroom.
The silver syringe is on the floor in front of her. She sees Victor and Cassie and pulls her sidearm. Cassie puts her hands up, and Victor steps in front of her. Whoa, 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 don't shoot! Esmeralda takes note of both of their reactions, neither of them violent. Nevertheless, she stays on guard. She speaks to them in English.
Back away.
You cannot hurt me with that.
Esmeralda lunges forward, grabbing the silver syringe and rising to her feet. She readies both weapons, but keeps her distance.
But I can kill you with this.
Is that why you're here?
I haven't decided yet.
Cassie slowly steps in front of Victor. Then how about telling us why you're after us in the first place? What's your story?
I could make coffee.
Esmeralda looks like her brain is in a knot. In the living room, Victor places a steaming cup of coffee in front of Esmeralda. He sits down across from her, next to Cassie.
We're called the Court of Miracles. It's an ancient order of the Catholic Church. Very secret. I'm not sure the Pope even knows we exist. We surveil, capture, and when necessary, terminate supernatural threats.
Like Prodigium.
We're nowhere near as big. We've got bases in most of the Catholic countries, but most have only a handful of operatives.
Were you at Manaus?
We had people there, but no, not personally.
Well, he was. Esmeralda looks at Victor. He sips some coffee.
You're one of them. The Dark Legion.
You didn't know?
We don't have Prodigium's intelligence network. There's a lot we don't know.
Well, pretty soon everybody's going to know. And this guy over here is going to be a world-renowned hero.
I don't think that's going to sit well with Quasi.
With who?
Quasimodo. Your son? That's what he goes by now. Started as a cruel nickname. Now he says he likes it.
Please, tell me about him. Tell me about my son.
Esmeralda takes a beat, sips some coffee.
Well, he's sweet, uncommonly kind. Unless you piss him off, but you usually have to hurt or disrespect someone else to do that.
He was always that way.
He's a terrific cook. He's really good at video games, like globally ranked at the new Tekken.
That is new.
And I think I might be in love with him.
Oh! Now everyone sips their coffee. Esmeralda is surprised at herself, as if maybe she just put two and two together in that very moment.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. I feel really close to him. I want good things for him, and I want to be part of them. Most mornings, I don't feel fully awake until I've seen him, and I think he feels the same way. But it's hard to get past the,
Esmeralda trails off as she remembers who she's talking to.
Also, I'm seeing someone else.
Cut to a close-up of Phoebus in a dark room, his face lit by a computer monitor.
Look, like a guy named Phoebus is a threat. Like, girl, dump him. His name is Phoebus. If you're a man named Phoebus, you single to me.
Cut to a close-up of Phoebus in a dark room, his face lit by a computer monitor. Now to the reverse angle. On the screen in front of him is a live surveillance feed of Cassie's house. The camera zooms in on a window to the living room and focuses in on Esmeralda. Phoebus' eyes narrow. Back to the house, a bit later. Cassie and Victor are seeing Esmeralda out the front door.
Thanks for the coffee.
Victor hands Esmeralda the syringe.
Don't forget this.
You shouldn't go back empty-handed. Your superiors will have questions. Esmeralda takes it, a bit in awe at the gesture.
A few weeks ago, I wanted to nuke your house from orbit.
And will that be harder or easier to do, now that you've met us? Esmeralda chuckles politely and turns towards the street. Before she reaches the sidewalk, Victor calls out.
Esmeralda, wait.
She turns back.
My son's new name. Quasimodo. How do I sign it?
She smiles and signs it to him. Victor repeats it back. Esmeralda walks away.
It would have been such a good bit if we had been able to seed earlier that Victor knows sign language.
Yeah.
Like in like the mummy's hand and just like not explained it until now.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where, like, I mean, if you have a child who needs that as a way to communicate, of course you're going to learn it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a kind of an idea that maybe in the deep backstory of Esmeralda and Quasimodo's friendship is that one of the reasons why she's like close to him is that she already knew how to sign, and that they became friends, and she sort of became his interpreter around the base.
Yeah.
Victor and Cassie re-enter the house to find Gwen standing in the living room in a bathrobe. This is a scene that can slot into Native American Werewolf. You left me a couple of spots, and this is what I want to put in there.
Okay.
Who is that?
A friend.
A friend I'm not supposed to know about.
Gwen, I'm sorry.
You know, Vic, you apologize more than anyone I've ever met in my life. What do you think that says about you? Gwen, he's just trying to... And when you're not apologizing, she's apologizing for you. You have no concept of the ridiculous amount of grace you've received from everyone in your life. You murdered Nick's best friend, and he forgave you. You executed Larry's mother, and he forgave you. Hell, you butchered Cassie's entire family, and apparently that only endeared her to you, so there's a match made in heaven.
Gwen,
Don't say you're sorry. I don't care if you're sorry. An apology isn't something you can keep trading for forgiveness again and again and again. I don't have to accept it, and I won't. With that, Gwen storms back upstairs. Cassie reaches for Victor's hand, and he pulls it away. After a moment, she goes upstairs too. I know this doesn't quite line up with the timetable of your script, Dalton, but this really feels like the scene after which Gwen should go upstairs and cope by shooting up the werewolf serum when she's upset. That feels like that goes after this.
It does not line up, and I don't know how it could, but we'll fudge it.
Yeah. Esmeralda sneaks back to the base and slips into a quiet equipment bay. There's no one else here at first, but she hears Phoebus from over her shoulder. Esmeralda. She plays it cool.
Hey, I hope this is a social call.
She kisses him. He kisses back, then takes a step away. I wish it was.
Who is Phoebus played by?
A French heartthrob.
Okay.
Frollo emerges from around a corner.
Your Eminence, I can explain.
She pulls a syringe off her belt.
Quasimodo left this at the Frankenstein house. I didn't want him in any worse trouble, so you went back alone to retrieve it. Yes. And while you were there, you decided to stop for a cup of coffee.
Esmeralda gulps, thinks for a moment, and then pivots like she's going to sprint for the door. Phoebus elbows her in the gut and then hits her in the chin with a right cross. She falls. His foot is on her chest before she can stand.
What now, then? A court-martial? This goes beyond insubordination, my dear. You've committed treason against the court. There's no way we could ever trust you again, and given how important secrecy is to our organization, I simply cannot risk letting you live.
Esmeralda looks up at Frollo, then at Phoebus, who is totally stone-faced, then back at Frollo.
Quasimodo never forgave his birth father for hurting a woman he loved. Oh, I know. And he won't forgive him for what happens to you either.
Esmeralda's eyes widen with horror as Frollo casually walks over to a freight elevator. The doors open. There's something inside. Something huge. Frollo turns to it and says, in English,
Sanctuary.
A pair of bloodshot eyes open under a heavy brow. A massive figure slowly approaches the pinned Esmeralda. Its footfalls are so heavy. Esmeralda squirms under Phoebus' heel, trying to wiggle free. When that doesn't work, she swings up and punches Phoebus in the groin, and he falls to his knees. She jumps to her feet, but it's too late. A massive hand covers her face, muffling her scream. The last thing we see is one of her eyes in the gap between the thing's fingers. There's a squelching sound, and we cut to black.
Wait, is that Elsa? Were you fucking with me?
Not Elsa. I promise you it's not Elsa.
Okay, I thought you were pulling another this isn't going to be a musical thing with me.
No, it's not Elsa.
Because that could be Elsa.
It could be, but it's not where I wanted to go.
Okay.
It actually really never occurred to me for this to be Elsa because it does not fit into like the themes and the ideas of what I'm doing here.
Okay.
But again, people always have ideas that would be much more economic than whatever it is I'm doing that would require less explanation and take less time in the script.
Here's my brief. I know this probably is completely incompatible with what you're going to do, so I'm not suggesting we change anything. But the thing that occurs to me is that we have so many parallels here. We have Esmeralda in love with Quasimodo, the way that Cassie is maybe in love with Victor. And, like, as Esmeralda saying, like, I do love him, but it's hard to look past that's something Cassie experiences.
That's something that I kind of wanted to play with and didn't have room for.
We have that playing, but then we also have... now Victor's got his son that he killed is back and wants revenge, while we would also have Cassie's sister that she killed who is back and ready for revenge.
I think that's great.
A big sort of familial, the Hunchback story being a perfect parallel for both Victor and Cassie's story. Like, it kind of all three stories could be one story.
Yeah, it's not compatible with the way that I want the story to end in terms of the resonance that I want to happen. But there's definitely a version of this where that could work. And I don't know, maybe there's even a 2-hour, 120-page version of this script where there is room for Elsa to be involved and create those catalogs, and play those parallels.
Yeah.
But bear with me here.
We got the big guy from Resident Evil 3 coming out of the elevator.
Sure, I've played a video game.
Sorry, I'm the Resident Evil guy. You're the...
I'm a Metal Gear Solid guy.
You're the Metal Gear Solid guy. That's right. I
played Resident Evil 4. Co-op one. That was fun.
Yeah.
We pick up with a local TV news broadcast where an anchor is explaining that sanitation workers have found the horrifically mangled body of an unidentified woman in the 13th arrondissement. The body has over 90 broken bones, including a crushed skull, and while the severity of the damage would seem to indicate some sort of industrial accident, the bruising implies that this damage was done by hand. This, on the heels of a string of unexplained incidents that the police have dismissed as animal attacks, has some citizens wondering if Paris is about to become the next Manaus. The audio gradually fades out completely as we pull away from the TV to see that Quasimodo is sitting on the floor of his room, perpendicular to the screen, hugging his legs. Frollo bends down into frame and offers him a cup of tea, which he refuses. Why? Why would he do this?
He's a monster, son. You were right from the beginning.
Why would she go out there alone?
The police found this on the scene. I was able to convince them not to tell the press.
Frollo presents Quasimodo with a clear plastic evidence bag containing the long silver syringe. He puts it down between them.
The serial number matches the one you signed out for the raid.
Quasimodo chokes.
Did you leave it there?
He covers his face, nods. Frollo puts an arm over Quasimodo for a moment, and when he can, he signs.
She was always looking out for you, like a sister.
Quasimodo breaks down, and the sound returns to the scene as he howls in pain. Cut to Cassie and Victor watching this same news broadcast in their living room. It's nighttime.
I promise you, this was not my doing.
I didn't ask, but I don't like the alternative much either.
You're suggesting it was William, Quasimodo. There are other monsters out there.
Yes, but it would be one hell of a coincidence. Unless it has something to do with whatever case Gwen is working.
Case?
Come on, did you smell her the other night? I don't think she's running around in the sewers recreationally. Seriously, she's never home. Where do you think she goes all night?
So is the person they're talking about that on the news the woman that Gwen...
No, it's Esmeralda.
It is Esmeralda.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the woman that gets killed by the werewolf.
No.
Okay.
But I did throw a reference to the public...
That's why I was wondering, because the timeline doesn't quite match up. But there was a horribly mangled woman. There's actually been a couple horribly mangled women on the streets of Paris.
Dalton.
So no, it's good. We just had to clarify that one is Esmeralda. And she like dead? We don't know.
Esmeralda?
Yeah.
She's wicked dead.
Oh, you really did?
Yeah, I did not plan to
her.
kill her. Got to that juncture in the movie and realized she had to go.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just became the logical thing for the characters to do. And it pushed the plot forward in a way that I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. And so that's the way that my mind works when I'm writing.
I thought you were faking us out. That,
no,
I thought Frollo was trying to trick Quasimodo and Esmeralda would turn out to be alive somewhere.
No, she's dead. Sorry. Yeah, it sucks. I had more things for her to do. But we got there and it became a situation where, well, one thing I have to do is I have to escalate the tension between Quasimodo and Victor. I have to do a full heel turn for Frollo, even though I think I've been pretty clear that he sucks.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I would want to go back is maybe kind of soften him in a little bit in both directions when it comes to Quasimodo, because I do want to make it clear that I think he does care about him, but he cares a lot more about himself and his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I turn him pretty cartoon later. I'll just let you know. I'm going to give you some really big villain monologues.
Okay.
But yeah, we got there and I'm like, well, I kind of thought that the movie was going to end eventually with her realizing that Gwen is the werewolf who destroyed her village and getting, if not in this film, then in a future film, more pissed and maybe joining the Dark Legion Revenge Squad. Yeah. But I got to this point and I'm like, no, this is just backstory for her. Her story ends here. It sucks because I kind of did throw her in a fridge. But the reason that trope is problematic is like the reverse Bechdel test. It's not that a movie or a story in which no two named women have a conversation about something other than a man is like, if it doesn't have that, then it's a misogynist work. The women in refrigerators became a problem because like 9 out of 10 women were stuffed in refrigerators. So I'm like, this is where the story's going. I have to do it.
We've talked about this on here before, but I don't know that I like that. I mean, we'll see how the rest of the story plays out, but I feel like you could have accomplished the same things by having it be a fake out.
I feel that makes it, you do, this is rich coming from you, Dalton, because you do the cruelest shit to your characters.
No, but here's why. Here's my argument. The thing is, all those things that you said, I think also work if Frollo is just trying to get Esmeralda away from Quasimodo and says like, oh yeah, she's dead. That mangled body, we can't recognize her, but we've confirmed it is Esmeralda. Here's the serial. Like the serial number thing especially feels like, here's the proof, like he's like really laying, like.
Well, that's more to push the guilt for Quasimodo to have him feel like it's his fault.
But he can do that even if Esmeralda's still alive, because the reason I think I'm taking issue is because it does feel like this actually dead ends some interesting narrative paths, like Esmeralda and Quasimodo being in love. Like, we've just had Esmeralda realize she's in love with Quasimodo. What's the point if she's going to die in the next scene? Well,
for one thing, I think it makes her more of a complete person to get her know a little bit better. I think that if you're going to kill her, it should feel like something. If you're going to kill off a character, especially if you're going to kill off a character in a really cruel and sudden way, you should know that person. Otherwise, instead of feeling it, you're going to laugh it off, being like, I saw that coming.
No,
right?
I know.
I think you have to do that sometimes.
It just feels like this.
I want it to make people mad, right? This is, and I'm not saying that means that if people are mad, then I win, right? Like, it's you're allowed to have criticisms about this. I'm only a little bit defensive because I feel like I think I can't think of a reason for Frollo unless other than he's not as evil as I establish him to be as the story escalates. Why would he fake it?
Well,
what does he gain from
to push back on you? I think that's your job.
Okay.
If there's a narrative reason. And I think, look, this is just a difference of how we would do things.
But it's either the question of, all right, so I don't have a lot more for her to do in this story, but I have ideas for her to do more in future stories. Like,
I think things could happen in this story, like the love between her and Quasimodo.
Sure.
The confrontation with Gwen about the Romani, about her past.
Yeah.
Like, it seems, the reason that it feels like it dead ends more storylines than it advances. And I think that's I think all of the tension still works if she's still alive. And I think we can have our cake and eat it too. And in this case, it feels like we're not even baking the cake.
Okay, that's a fair criticism.
But
I stand by this in the sense that I think that sometimes if you're going to cut a life short, it should feel like you're cutting a life short, not that a character's story is over and now they die. I think that in order for someone's death in a story to feel tragic, you have to be able to see a road ahead of them that you would want to see, right? I think if a character dies because they're no longer useful or no longer have stories, that's one thing. But I think if you want a gut punch, I think it has to be someone you'll miss, someone who you wanted to know longer. You wanted to know more about them. You wanted to see what's going to happen next in their lives. And now you don't get to. That is what the villain has taken from you as an audience, in addition to what he's taken away from the characters. That's my feeling on it.
Yes. The fine line there is, does it feel like the villain is taking it from you, or does it feel like the storyteller is taking it from you?
Well,
and I'm not sure yet. I'll
leave that for the audience to decide.
We can see where I mean, again, there's still 20 pages left of the script. So, but as it stands, I'm kind of like, I'm disappointed by that.
Okay, fair enough. Some people might be pissed. Again, I'll accept the criticism that I did just do the thing where I savagely killed off a female character in order to advance the emotional stakes for the male love interest. I have done that. I will cop to it. I got to this point in the story. I will also miss her as a character. I think that she had potential, but when I weighed the option of killing or not killing the character, it felt toothless not to do it. It felt like this. I have a thing where I generally, and there are exceptions to this, and we've talked about it on the bonus podcast even, I think, I think that making it appear as if a character has died in order to raise the stakes and then revealing that character has not died is bullshit. I mean, it can be done well, but typically it's borrowed tension, and I don't like it. Like, obviously, this is a particularly egregious example, but the fucking Chewbacca thing in Rise of Skywalker, and we're just talking about it, one of the worst fucking executed twists or rug pulls in a movie on that scale fucking ever.
I don't think this would be that, though, because this feels like, I mean, like, maybe I missed it because I was thinking about Elsa. Does she, like, physically die on screen?
We have the monster, like, grab her head, and then we hear a squelching sound. We spare you the actual seeing her head.
I think
squish.
I think the reason is, me as an audience member, I saw that cut to black, and then Frollo having the syringe is like, oh, this is an obvious narrative she's not dead moment.
Oh,
like,
okay.
this is, it felt to me like, oh, okay, so Frollo is doing this as revenge on Quasimodo, and this is part of his plan. This is part of his nefarious thing. And so it was genuinely a surprise to me. I'm like, wait, you actually killed her? What?
Okay,
well,
it didn't feel that's like that. Maybe where, like, my attempt to maybe have a little discretion by not having it be explicit. They're, like, showing pictures of her mangled body on the screen for them to identify was maybe a little toothless on my part. But I love these debates. I think they make for a good podcast.
Yeah.
Let us know how you feel about it on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Discord. We are at Dark Universe Pod on all those platforms. And we are, you can access our Discord from patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. Please, however, wait until you finish listening to the entire episode to voice your opinion, as it may change based on what happens.
True.
However, Esmeralda is for reals. He's dead. Imagine if I did the whole speech about how I hate when people do that, and I've just done it in the meta version and just, like, argued about that just to hide that I'm bringing her back.
That would be, I would respect the hustle.
Give me a second. I got to rewrite some stuff. Okay, picking back up in this scene. That poor woman. She had a good heart. I think she could have turned this all around for us. Cassie stops short. Oh, no.
What is it?
A sound from outside rattles the window, like a faraway whistle, getting louder. Victor, cover me! The next moment, a rocket-propelled grenade explodes against the exterior wall. Victor lunges forward to put his body between Cassie and the flying debris. He wraps her up in his arms as they are engulfed in rubble. The room fills up with dust and smoke. On the opposite rooftop, Captain Phobos stands next to a soldier carrying a shoulder-mounted RPG launcher. A third soldier loads in another rocket. Phobos shouts, "Fire!" A second rocket flies into the house through the massive hole in the wall into a cloud of dust. A big left hand reaches out of the smoke and catches it. It explodes in his fist as he crushes it Hulk style. Victor, of course, isn't the Hulk, and when the smoke clears, his skin is charred and sizzling. His clothes are on fire, and most of his hair has been burned away. He is Darth Vader at Mustafar levels of fucked up, but he's still standing. From the rooftop, Phobos stands in awe. We look up at him from below as another man leaps over top of him with a running start. It's Quasimodo, who hits Victor with a 4-story missile dropkick to the chest. Quasimodo unloads a flurry of vicious strikes. Victor tries to parry and evade, but it's no use.
William, please stop.
Victor won't strike back, and Quasi's attacks interrupt his attempts at sign language. Quasimodo kicks Victor onto his back and punches his head again and again, screaming and crying until finally, Victor stops stirring. End of Act 2. We just took a long break.
Timeline-wise, this must happen the same night that Gwen is finding her mother.
Yes, so we have to kind of insert some time in between the death of Esmeralda and this attack. So
why? What does it matter exactly when the death of Esmeralda happens?
I mean, it has to theoretically happen the night of
the bathroom
bathroom thing. Yeah.
Oh, geez, yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. We have a little bit of an Empire Strikes Back problem, but it's the opposite of what I thought. My story moves faster than yours.
Yeah, yours moves a lot faster because mine takes place over a whole month.
Well, what we could do is imagine that, or insert the idea that Esmeralda disappears for a while, and that's where we could have some story take place, like some more subplot stuff, maybe some room for the Victor and Cassie relationship stuff, and maybe some more Quasimodo and Frollo stuff. Have a little cooldown period. Where some more character can happen, where they're wondering, Esmeralda's missing and Quasi's worried, right? And then we kick the action back in when her body is found.
Yeah. And then there's also, we had talked about there being like a almost reconciliation between Gwen and Victor before Gwen's date night.
Yeah, and then maybe we could swap those conversations. So I think there's room there. Again, like, as long as this is, it's still not a full movie.
The thing is, like, oh man, narratively, everything feels like it's a fake out. Like, the fact that Quasimodo is now going ham on Victor after, like, forgiving him feels like such a, oh yeah, the villain found a way to manipulate him again. Like, that's like Frollo is manipulating Quasimodo into doing his bidding and attacking Victor. And the way he does that is by making him think that his girlfriend's dead. You know, like it's even more so that just like the story beats tell me that she's not dead.
Yeah,
even though I know she's dead.
And the character, as I understand him in my head, first of all, we've established he's a piece of shit, particularly to her.
Sure, but
she's not interested in him sexually, and she's no longer useful at work. She's dead.
I understand why, like, that he's a bad guy. It just feels like there would be a one-line throwaway where it could be like, his family has history with her family, or he is secretly in love with her, or Phoebus saves her at the like Frollo leaves, and then in that blackout, it turns out Phoebus saves her because Phoebus still has feelings for her. Like, a whole number of things could have happened in that blackout that would not even distract from Frollo, and then it leads to Esmeralda's return in the third act. Like
the thing that seemed most. The saving throw for Frollo that I could imagine is a story I was not interested in telling, which is that he locks her up and tries to be like, well, you could get your life back if blah, 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 have sex with me. Which
that's one option.
It's fine. It's fucking, I wasn't a story I was interested in telling. It's just his character, I think, is so fucking focused on, he's so objective driven.
I think Phoebus is the answer because Phoebus is in love with her. Like, they do have a relationship.
I don't think so. They could be. There's no reason they couldn't be. I think for him, it's, they're fucking around. I just
don't think that death
these are choices the storytellers make. It could be that he has more complicated feelings.
Yeah, I just don't know if the death is as necessary as you think it is.
Okay,
but it happened.
Yeah,
and
it's canon.
We got to live with
it. Yeah.
But that's I think this is like the biggest like narrative disagreement we've had on the show
ever
is Esmeralda's death. I want her around, and not because my heart is broken, but I actually kind of feel the Chewbacca thing. I feel like the inverse Chewbacca thing, where it's like, you're like, what do you mean she's dead? Like, no, there's still stuff we have to do, Like, right. It's,
I will again stress that I think that is kind of the nature of death that narratives sometimes hide from us by making it feel as if it's been forecast. Like, I think that, like, that is, to me, a more valuable character death dynamic, is that it's when a person in the prime of their lives fucking dies, there's a certain horror movie logic where it's like, oh, they have to have transgressed, they have to deserve it. Be like, well, usually not.
Yes, but that sort of death realism, we talked about this a bit on our bonus pod with like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Mm-hmm. That sort of death realism also exists within a context. Like right now, the context of this movie is there is a secret Catholic supernatural hunting down people, and they are firing rocket launchers on a Paris street. Like, it is very much a pulp tropey in a good way, like, because the way that all of our movies are tropey, where like a sort of like, it feels comic booky and it feels elevated and it feels Sam Raimi-esque, like that sort of heightened sensibility that Sam Raimi has, where a death isn't going to feel like a real life death no matter what the context is, just because this film isn't that. Like, this film isn't a meditation on the suddenness of life ending. No, it's a monster movie.
Yeah, and you know what? Things really only get more comic book. I mean, again, we just had somebody blow up their house with a rocket launcher. I can accept the criticism that it's not consistent with the tone of the rest of the movie. The tone, and I'll buy that.
And that's why I think that's maybe the core disconnect I'm feeling here, is that the tone of the movie says this should be template matching with comic booky type movies, and the template here is the fake out.
Okay.
And so it just feels discordant with the rest of the tone. But as we said, it's happened.
It's happened, but no, now you've won me over a little bit. We're still stuck with it. And listen, I not that we need more characters.
Yeah.
But, she is somebody who I continue to be interested in.
Yeah.
But I feel good about my choice. People may disagree with me. I completely understand that, particularly with this particular argument.
And it makes good podcasting.
It does.
These kinds of disagreements are why we're here.
People are going to comment, fight more. Your mission in the next episode is to piss off your co-host.
Look, we both love each other very much.
Yes.
Mom and dad are not fighting.
It's definitely not your fault either, audience.
No,
okay?
we are having...
This is just something between us.
A creative debate is good for both of us.
All right, I guess
and it happened.
Anything else you want to talk about before we roll into Act 3? We've had a lot of time to unpack.
Yes, I mean, everything else is... I'm really liking everything. Things are getting very big in a way that feels at odds with Native American Werewolf, but I don't know if that's necessarily in a bad way. But like rocket launchers in the street is definitely an escalation of where things have been.
One rocket launcher.
Okay.
Firing a total of 2 rockets.
Sure. Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
It's not all out war.
This was a busy night in Paris, but we knew
Yes.
that. We knew it was going to be a busy night in Paris. All right, I think we can move on to Act 3. We've debated enough.
Act 3. For a split second, we see a white spark, like a shock of static electricity, illuminating a pair of hands. We fade in and out of focus, like the lens is covered in film or jelly. Eventually, we see that it's Caroline looking down at us.
William, can you hear me?
We fade back out. Quasimodo sits in the back of a van looking down at Victor's shackled, unconscious body. The van makes its way towards Notre Dame as emergency vehicles weave around traffic in the opposite direction. Back at the house, Cassie pushes over the couch that's been her shelter since the rockets went off. She rises to her feet, coughing and patting dust off of her clothes. As the police cruisers, fire trucks, and ambulances approach in the distance, Cassie finds her way out of the ruins of her house and into a neighbor's garden. Once she's clear, she pulls her phone out of her pocket and places a call. Hey! Sorry for the 911. I know you're more of a texting person. You're in gaming circles, right? Ever heard of anyone by the handle Quasimodo? Victor awakens in the dimly lit laboratory beneath the Court of Miracles. He's strapped to an angled operating table, still wearing the burns and scars from the rocket attack. In front of him stands Frollo, fiddling with surgical tools. There are rows of electrical equipment, both new and old, set up all around the room, like in the cold open. There's also something behind Frollo, cloaked in shadow, still as a statue. They converse in English.
Ah, good. You are alive. It's been difficult to tell. I didn't think it would be possible to capture you intact, but my son was insistent that you live to suffer for as long as possible. I can't pass up such a rare opportunity.
Where am I?
You're nearly a kilometer beneath Notre Dame de Paris. It's one of our most precious cultural landmarks, and it's been closed to the public for almost 5 years. You're a very privileged individual.
This is the Court of Miracles.
Correct? Did you get that name from the late Agent Aprea, or do our exploits finally rate the attention of Prodigium and their ilk?
The former.
Ah, oh well. I'm certain that after tonight, I'll have their attention. Perhaps even their respect.
Who are you?
Frollo is taken aback.
Now that does hurt. That Esmeralda would tell you about the court and never once mention me by name. I thought I had her respect. I am the Archdeacon Claude Frollo. I am your son's new father. It was you who revived him? The second time, yes. I was quite pleased with myself, decoding your daughter's notes and reproducing her work, after countless others had failed. A man, twice dead, 2 centuries in the ground, now alive by my hand. I am a powerful man, Dr. Frankenstein, but I must tell you, this was a thrill like I'd never experienced. I adored my creation, flaws and all. I took pride in his every accomplishment, and I showered him in all the affection that you, my emotionally stunted mountain man, never offered. But like so many parents, as my child matured, I found that I had more love to give, and I was quite certain that I could do better the second time around. Make someone stronger, fiercer, more loyal. So I started from scratch. I applied what I learned, I experimented further, I pushed the limits of the brilliant Miss Clerval's research, and I built a creature that would put even you to shame.
Frollo turns to face the shape in the shadows.
Sanctuary.
The shape moves. What appeared as if it might have been a life-size statue of a man stands up to its full 10-foot height. It steps into the light. It's an impossibly massive man, all muscle. He wears a completely blank expression on his face, which bears a striking resemblance to Frollo's. The creature, who we'll call Little Brother, grunts.
This, by the way, can be our obligatory Bruce Campbell cameo in our Sam Raimi movie. It's a Sam Raimi movie. You got to have Bruce Campbell, and you got to have a creature that is at least some of the time done practically. So underneath all that makeup or whatever, Bruce Campbell.
Who was he?
No one. This body has never lived. I created it with my own hands. He's endured muscle and bone growth that no living person could have survived, and at the moment, he's conditioned to respond to my every command. But as proud as I am, he's still only a shadow of his older brother, Quasimodo. Why, you ask? Because he has no soul.
If what you want is loyalty, then why does that matter?
Why do men still ride horses? The automobile is a century old, it's faster, it's more reliable, and it doesn't shit on your boots. But a machine has no will to break. It can only be operated, never dominated. This is why God allows us the freedom to deny him, for the satisfaction of knowing that each soul that enters the kingdom of heaven is a soul that was truly one. It is through the submission of others that we can understand the power of God.
You have a fondness for speaking.
But this titan before you has no will to break, no soul to win, not like Quasimodo. There is some step in the process that restored his soul the first time around, something that Caroline never recorded. It must have been done to create you as well. I must know what it is.
At long last, Frollo stops talking, and there is silence.
Well?
Victor says nothing.
What is it?
If I had that knowledge, I would not punish this creature by sharing it with you.
Then I shall have to make good on my promise to Quasimodo.
Frollo selects a scalpel from the tray in front of him and leans in. In his quarters, Quasimodo is sitting at his computer, physically and emotionally spent. He scrolls through his Discord chat history with Esmeralda. He has a new message request. It's from a user with whom he has 3 mutual friends, named Creature Keeper. Creetcher Keeper. He accepts it. The message reads, "It wasn't Victor." Quasimodo writes back, "Who is this?" Creature Keeper. "A friend of his. And yours, if you want it." Quasimodo. "If you're a friend of his, then I don't trust you." Creature Keeper. "You don't have to trust me. Trust yourself and keep your eyes open."
How good is Hunter at Tekken?
We'll find out. Cut to Quasimodo entering the equipment bay. A cleaning crew is finishing a mop-up job. This is where the timetable, the idea of it being longer between the death doesn't work, but fucking don't worry about it. We can move that. Cut to Quasimodo entering the equipment bay. A cleaning crew is finishing a mop-up job. He knocks on a nearby guard's arm and points at the crew. He doesn't know sign, but Quasimodo can read his lips.
Chemical spill. Stay clear.
Quasimodo approaches the freight elevator, where Phobos is standing guard. Quasimodo signs to him. "I want to see him." Phobos can understand him, but doesn't sign back, keeping both of his hands on his rifle. Instead, he speaks. "No can do. My orders are to let no one else into the lab. No exceptions." Quasimodo shoves Phobos aside and presses the down button, calling for the lift. Phobos readies his rifle and aims it at Quasimodo. "Stay back, freak!" In a flash, Quasimodo grabs the rifle and points it at the ceiling. Phobos fires, drawing the attention of the nearby guards. Before they can respond, the doors to the freight elevator open. Quasimodo smashes the controls so that Phobos can't follow and then locks himself inside. It begins its long descent to the laboratory. Back to Victor and Frollo in the lab. Frollo slides a scalpel across Victor's bare chest, lifting up long curls of skin like he's peeling an orange. Victor fights the impulse to scream.
This can continue for as long as you choose, Dr. Frankenstein. Each layer will hurt more than the one above it.
There's a loud gasp from behind Frollo. He turns and sees that Quasimodo is here, standing in front of little brother, looking up at him with slack-jawed awe. Frollo waves for his attention, and then signs.
"Son, you're not supposed to be down here."
"What is this?"
"This is your new baby brother. He was going to be a surprise, but seeing as you're here, perhaps you'd like to help. The good doctor here is withholding information that will allow me to complete him. Would you like to help me extract that information? I'd be happy to teach you."
Quasimodo studies little brother, then looks to Frollo's proud face, then to Victor's defeated one. Victor looks down to his own hand, which is strapped by the wrist to the operating table. Quasi follows his gaze. Though his movement is restricted and he can't do the full motion, Victor's intent is unmistakable. It's Quasimodo's name sign. We flash to Esmeralda signing it to Victor. This hits Quasi like a brick. We watch him make sense of all of this in his head, and it looks like a panic attack. Frollo offers Quasimodo a scalpel. Quasi steadies himself and cautiously accepts it. He steps towards Victor and presses the point of the scalpel against his skin. He looks over to Frollo, who's never looked so mad to him before. Quasimodo flicks the scalpel down swiftly, cutting Victor's left wrist free. Before Frollo can even react, Victor's fist slams dead on into his face. He dropped like a stone, his nose totally flattened. Quasimodo undoes the rest of Victor's restraints. Victor tries to stand, but is too weak. Quasimodo offers him help. Victor leans on his son. As they limp towards the elevator, Frollo regains consciousness, clears the blood from his throat, and says,
Sanctuary.
Little brother looks at him.
Bring me Quasimodo. Kill the other one.
Little brother runs with an unsettling speed, reaching the lift doors before they open. He kicks Victor off Quasimodo's shoulder, grabs Quasi by the collar, and hurls him back towards Frollo like a shot put. Quasi skips like a stone. Little brother turns its attention towards the weakened Victor. This isn't a fight. This is a punishment. Quasimodo struggles to his feet. Frollo does the same.
Son, I can explain everything.
You killed Esmeralda.
She turned against us.
You killed Esmeralda, and you did it to manipulate me. An entire life thrown away. She deserves so much better. You're disgusting.
I did what was best for our family.
You're not my family. Frollo reaches back to slap Quasimodo across the face. Quasi catches it and snaps his wrist like a twig. Frollo screams. Frollo claws at him with his other hand. Quasi grabs that one and crushes it. We hear every bone in his hand snap like stalks of celery. Quasimodo releases him, and he drops to his knees. Frollo looks at his mangled limbs, raises them as if to sign something, but they're useless. Quasimodo looks down at him, shakes his head, and turns his back. Frollo screams after him as he walks, but he doesn't hear it, and neither do we. Victor is absorbing blow after blow from Little Brother, completely punch-drunk. Finally, the elevator door opens and Victor stumbles inside, but Little Brother follows him in. Quasimodo hurries to join them, but the doors close in his face and the lift starts moving. Inside the elevator, Little Brother slams Victor's head against the walls. Quasimodo breaks into the elevator shaft and follows the lift up, swinging and bounding from beam to beam and from floor to floor. Up in the equipment bay, Phobos and 6 more armed guards stand with their weapons trained on the elevator door. The doors don't open so much as they explode outward as Little Brother hurls Victor's body through them, knocking down the guards like bowling pins. I got really simile happy here, didn't I? Sorry, folks.
It's good for action scenes.
In the elevator shaft, Quasimodo struggles to squeeze his body between the lift car and the shaft wall, making his way to the hatch on the roof of the car. He finally makes it, drops into the lift, and charges at Little Brother. Little Brother drops Victor and focuses on the more active threat, and now the two of them go at it. Quasi rolls and dodges, choosing his strikes carefully and hitting impact points, kidney punches, uppercuts, judo throws. Little Brother's swings are wild, but every time he connects, it takes Quasimodo off his feet. Quasimodo changes strategy and starts pulling equipment from the crates and racks. He throws a flashbang at Little Brother's feet and shields his own eyes. It blinds and deafens the beast, and Quasi uses the disorientation to climb onto his shoulders and drop fists and elbows on his head before finally swinging him to the floor with a Hurricane Rana, also known as a Frankensteiner.
Wow.
Little
That's
Brother...
the third of 3 wrestling references.
The last one, folks. I gotta do rule of 3s. Little Brother is dazed, now lying flat on his back. Quasimodo leaps onto him, stomps his chest, then straddles it. He takes heaving breaths, his fist ready to strike if his opponent stirs. Victor finally makes it to his feet, some distance from where Quasi and Little Brother have landed. Quasi looks around the room, sees the dead and unconscious guards and the wrecked equipment, then realizes where he is. We flash back to the cleanup crew from earlier. This is the exact spot where Esmeralda was murdered. Quasimodo roars and winds back a punch. Victor tries to run to him, but stumbles.
Son, don't!
Quasimodo swings a mighty right cross to Little Brother's face. In an extreme close-up, we see a violet spark at the point of impact. Little Brother's fist clench, his eyes focus, his brow furrows. He grabs Quasimodo by the hair and punches him through the ceiling. He lands on the floor above, in the main hub, with the giant computer monitor. In the equipment bay, Victor tries in vain to restrain Little Brother. The beast throws him against the metal shelf housing several acetylene tanks. One of them rolls across the floor to the opposite side of the bay, where it stops next to a crate of rocket-propelled grenades. Victor sits in the bent wreck of the acetylene shelf, grabs one of the tanks, and swings it at Little Brother. The nozzle pulls loose on impact, and it begins leaking flammable gas into the air. Victor lands a punch that puts some distance between them. He looks up and sees that Quasimodo is peering down through a hole in the ceiling. Victor drops the tank and signs,
Climb! Get to the surface!
Quasi nods and gets moving. Little Brother notices, but is distracted when a bullet catches him in the shoulder. He turns and sees Captain Phobos, his rifle trained on him. Stand down! Little Brother steps towards him. Sanctuary! Stand down! The code word no longer affects him. Before Phobos can fire another shot, Little Brother grabs each of his shoulders and pulls outward, splitting the screaming Phobos down the middle. The other surviving guards either open fire or run. Little Brother goes after them. While Little Brother is occupied, Victor climbs on top of an equipment crate and through the hole in the ceiling. He runs as best as he can through the corridors, following the fleeing agents and technicians like rats out of a flooding house. Most are heading towards the tunnel that leads to an exit far from the cathedral, their usual egress and ingress from the base. Victor, however, sees Quasimodo standing in front of a double door at the end of the other hall. He meets them there, and they enter another elevator, the one that Quasi and Esmeralda took to the cathedral. Also, this would be another great opportunity to use the handholds I established in the first act for how Quasimodo can get around people.
Sure.
Forgot about that when I wrote this section. He's using those.
Cool.
We cut to the equipment bay where little brother kills the last guard standing. He looks up at the hole in the ceiling and leaps through it, just as the elevator door behind him slides open and Archdeacon Frollo limps out of it. We rack focus and see that the leaking acetylene tank is rolling to join its brother next to the RPGs. We pan up and see that the broken ceiling has left an electric wire exposed. Upstairs...
Oh, it's a wiring problem, just like the original fire.
Well, I didn't... Fuck! That's an example of the script being smarter than me. Upstairs, Quasimodo and the exhausted Victor take a breather on one of the pews in the cathedral. They take in their beautiful surroundings. Victor signs.
This is much nicer than the church we used to go to.
I loved that church. It was one of the only places he would take me. I always looked forward to Sundays.
He'll be coming after us soon.
I thought I'd beaten him. Then it's like he just woke up. What happened?
Same thing that happened to me. The final piece. Your sister's science was extraordinary. She could revive a body, but she could not truly restore life. Only two things can do that. True love and abject hatred. Your sister created me out of hate, and I became a monster. She made you out of love, and you became yourself.
You're different now.
Your mother saved me. We were reunited for just a moment, but it was enough. Her love brought me back to myself.
Another quiet moment.
Son,
The floor beneath the cathedral's pulpit erupts, and little brother rises from the rubble. He stands before a glorious stained glass window, raises a hand, and points a finger at Quasimodo. Quasi rises to the challenge. Victor tries to stand too, but Quasi reaches back and stops him. Quasi stares down little brother. His eyes say, "He's mine." Quasi leaps at little brother, and we finally get to see what he's capable of in a space that plays to all of his strengths. He soars beneath the high ceiling, he swings on the columns and pillars, he bounces off of walls. He's landing blow after blow while little brother flails with wild rage, but Quasi's strikes are designed to provoke, to agitate rather than to deal damage. He draws the beast away from the pulpit, towards the back of the church, and up to the north bell tower, where Notre Dame's 8 smaller bells live. Below, Victor lumbers out of the pews with intent to follow, but collapses onto the floor. Meanwhile, Frollo steps out of the elevator into the cathedral. In the bell tower, little brother tries to wrestle Quasimodo, who continues to escape his grasp. One of little brother's punches strikes a bell and the sound rattles him. Quasimodo takes his cue and starts striking all of the bells, flooding the tower with an overwhelming sound to which he is immune. Little brother clutches his head, paralyzed by the pain.
Yes, let's go.
Quasimodo steadies himself, closes his eyes, and takes a deep breath as if meditating. When he feels ready, he opens his palm and prepares to strike little brother in the chest. But before he can, he is struck in the back by a desperate but forceful kick from Archdeacon Frollo. It's not enough to knock him down, but it does get his attention, and little brother's. Little brother's eyes lock onto Frollo's and fill with a terrifying rage. He knocks Quasimodo aside and advances on the Archdeacon. Frollo stumbles, falls onto his back. He cries out,
"Sanctuary! Sanctuary!"
Frollo repeats this as little brother closes his hands around his head and squeezes until the blood and brains flow out over his fingers. Outside the cathedral, locals and tourists are gathering around in response to the disturbance. We see Cassie step out of a taxi and look up at the towers, where you can just make out the silhouette of a monster fight.
Is this on the opposite side of where Gwen is running towards it?
Yes. In the tower, Quasimodo watches in horror as little brother drops Frollo's lifeless body. Quasimodo cries out, takes a running start, and tackles little brother through the tower wall and into the other tower, where the 2 most massive bells live. He screams and pummels his opponent. He climbs little brother's body, palms his head, and drives it into the ancient bell Emmanuel. Once for Esmeralda, once for Frollo, once for himself. We see Victor struggling up the stairs to the south tower. Quasimodo pins little brother so that the bell is directly above his head. There's a rage pulsing through his veins, and we can see him fighting the impulse to keep hitting him. Instead, buckling and choking down tears, he once again closes his eyes and focuses his breathing. The soundtrack fades away. We see him and Esmeralda dancing in the bell tower. We see Caroline embrace him after their parents' death. we see his father signing his new name. Quasimodo squeezes his eyes tight, raises his hand, and slaps it down on the struggling Titan's chest. In extreme close-up, we see a tiny white spark. Half a mile below, in the equipment bay, a broken electric cable throws a spark into a rippling cloud of acetylene. Boom. We follow the massive eruption up from the deepest levels of the Court of Miracles, up the elevator shaft into the cathedral, whose foundation crumbles beneath it. Notre Dame is sinking into the earth. Quasimodo, startled, looks down at little brother, but his face is obscured by the bell. Victor emerges in the stairwell and pulls Quasimodo into it, just as the beams that hold Emmanuel snap and the 13,000-kilo bell plummets through the tower floor, through the ground floor, and into the gaping maw below, taking little brother with it. Victor holds his son close as the stairwell collapses along with the rest of the building. On the street, Cassie sees the cathedral implode and screams, "Victor!" Fade to black. We return in a new location, in the Pantheon, as a naked Gwen Conliffe pulls her cell phone out of the pocket of the clothes worn by what appears also to be Gwen Conliffe, torn apart as if from the inside. Gwen sees that she has 3 missed calls from Cassie. Then the phone rings again in her hand. "Cassie? Cassie, are you okay? Gwen, we need you to get here right away." "Why? What's going on?" There's been an accident." Gwen arrives at the wreckage of Notre Dame, where first responders are working to get civilians to safety, mostly to keep people away. The cathedral imploded completely inward, and apart from the large cloud of puddles and dust it emitted as it fell, there should be no serious damage to person or property. After all, the building was unoccupied. Cassie, of course, knows better. She sits on a curb opposite the cathedral with her head in her hands. Gwen approaches her, sits next to her, and holds her. They cry together. Until there's a shift in the rubble. Firefighters try to locate the epicenter and start digging. A moment later, the ground beneath them rises. Someone is lifting an entire collapsed wall out of the ground. It's Victor and Quasimodo carrying the weight of the stairwell together. They toss it aside and are greeted by something that neither is accustomed to: applause. Cassie and Gwen rush past police to embrace Victor. He hugs them back, squeezing them tight, Gwen in particular. Cut from one disaster area to another as the 4 of them walk through the remains of Cassie's house. "I destroyed your home. I don't even know where to begin." Victor interprets for Cassie. "Tell him I've gotten over worse. Besides, I knew something like this was bound to happen eventually. You would not believe the amount of insurance I put on this place. I might end up actually turning a profit on this. That said, I think Paris has worn out its welcome. Maybe we should go back and stay at the castle for a while." "Not me." Cassie and Victor turn to see Gwen approaching, carrying a framed photo of Larry from his high school graduation that she's retrieved from the rubble. "We have a lot of catching up to do, and there are some really hard conversations coming up, but I want to tear this Band-Aid off first. I'm going home to the States. I don't want to have a discussion about it. It's just something I've got to do." Victor bows his head.
Is this because I lied to you?
"No, this is about me. Hard as these past few months have been, I do really love you guys." They embrace. Victor signs to Quasimodo.
We are going to live at the castle. Would you like to come with us?
Quasi shakes his head. "Too much has happened. I'm glad to see you're a better man now. I'm happy for you. But I still remember who you used to be and how much you hurt me. I don't think I can be around you. I'm not ready for that. I might never be." Victor nods.
I understand.
After a beat, Victor signs.
I love you, son.
Quasimodo nods, turns, and walks away. Cassie and Gwen sidle up next to him, and we pull away, leaving them in the rubble of their life in Paris. Fade to black. Mid-credits scene!
Of course.
We cut into a round of Tekken 8. One of the players is absolutely stomping the other. It's a bloodbath. We pull back and see the losing player toss their controller in frustration.
Oh my God. Can we play something else?
It's Hunter Marin, whose exclamation gets transcribed into a chat window via a text-to-speech app. Quasimodo texts back, "You pick tomorrow's game, and I'll school you in that too."
Oh, you're on. I choose Forza Horizon. Let's see how well your 19th century ass can handle a sports car.
Quasimodo responds, "You're on." Hunter logs off and shuts their laptop. We can see now that they're in a small but high-tech recreational vehicle. The steering wheel is on the right side. They step out of the vehicle onto a tropical beach. A large sphere of water floats by their head.
Now, what are we going to do about this?
We pull back and see that the ocean is rising, as in lifting away from the beach and floating into the air piece by piece. Cut to black.
Hunter Marin will return in
Beneath the Black Lagoon.
Now, do you know what you're actually doing with this here?
No, it's just a cool image I wanted to play with.
Well, you're fucking tied to it now.
Yes, I am.
You can't fucking Elsa Falk your way out of this one.
No, I threw my hat over the wall. I have some conceptual, thematic ideas of what I wanted that movie to be about, but I don't have a lot of plot, so I figured I'd throw a really interesting image out there and have to write towards it.
Post-credits scene.
Not today, Dracula. Today we give you a gift. The gift of life.
We're in the dungeon of Dracula's castle. Dracula, played by Mads Mikkelsen, is on his knees, looking healthier than we've seen him recently, looking like his vampire self. Nick Morton towers over him, but in his final Set meets Osiris form from the end of House of Dracula. He's in full mummy mode, 12 feet tall with 4 irises in each eye. Mummy Nick holds his hands out, and bandages extend from them, wrapping around Dracula. When he's released, he's not just human, he's emaciated, drained of energy, just skin and bones. He collapses to the ground. Dracula looks up to see the black iron door of death standing tall between him and Nick, just a few feet away, but sealed shut. He reaches for it, and as he does, a wind whips through the dungeon, fluttering his thin hair.
Wait. Someone is here. Who is it? Show yourself, spirit!
The dungeon suddenly goes dark, and Mummy Nick freezes in place. Through the shadows, a faint outline of a face appears. A face that looks kind of like Danhausen, but like scarier. It's the demon, Pazuzu. Sorry to interrupt. Word got around that we had a very special guest with us down here, and I had to come see for myself.
Wait, help me, please.
Why would I do that? It's much more fun to see you lie in your own piss for all eternity.
I'll do anything. Please, return me to life.
I can't do that. You're damned, Dracula. I don't even know if you have a body up there for me to put you back into.
Then just open the door. That's all I ask. Open the door.
And what will I get in return? Dracula's eyes narrow. He can always find the strength to hate.
Van Helsing. Adelaide Van Helsing.
You're going to have to offer me more than a soul you planned on taking anyway. Dracula looks at Mummy Nick, standing tall and frozen beyond the door.
Nick Morton, the host of Set.
You need to think bigger, Count. I don't even get up in the morning for 2 measly human souls. Dracula's eyes roll in his head and he licks his chapped lips. He's desperate.
Set! I'll bring you Set!
Pazuzu pauses. Not possible. He is the ruler of this place.
Not when I'm done with him. I will subjugate him, and you will rule over him.
Pazuzu grins. At the very least, this will be fun to watch. All 3. Van Helsing, Morton, Set. I will open the door, but you still have to find your way back to the land of the living. If you do, and you bring me all of their souls, your reward will be your immortality returned.
You told me you couldn't do that.
And you believed me. But if you fail, Count Dracula, your pain will not end.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Spirit.
But Pazuzu is gone. The room has lightened again, but Nick is still frozen. There's a loud clank, and Death's door opens just a crack. Dracula reaches out a weak hand, and with all his might, he's able to push the door wide. He walks through. He finds himself on a black stone cliff overlooking an endless sea of fire. The wind starts to howl, and we slowly realize that it's not wind at all, but the sound of millions of screams swelling all around him. It crescendos, and we cut to black. The end.
Very cool. I like what you've done here in the sense that you've continued our sort of tradition of following each of the chapters of Dracula Lives in terms of like who the other characters are, while also advancing his story forward in a way that is ambiguous.
Yeah, I figured rule of 3s, the third time we did this, something had to change.
Yeah.
And he needed to break the cycle. So now we just have Dracula loose in hell, and he owes 3 souls to Pazuzu. Which also gives him...
one of which is the god of death.
Yes. So that gives him a kind of direction for where we can start to take him, and a goal for him to have.
All right. So then my challenge is going to be where to take this next, and also whether or not I'm going to incorporate anything from chapter 4 and continue that pattern, or just go off in a new direction now.
True.
So interesting. Well, we'll find out in a month.
Yes. Now let's talk Hunchback.
Here's something that's going to cheer you up.
Okay.
You are absolutely right. I now exactly know how Esmeralda would live and why it adds to the story.
Here's the thing.
What? You agree with me now?
Sort of.
Okay. How about you go first? And if maybe I don't have to say what I was going to say.
Well, I would like to hear it, but
okay.
I like that we have both sort of convinced each other a little bit. I like it because I do like where Quasimodo ends up. I like the when he's hitting the bell and he's thinking about dancing with Esmeralda, and he's thinking about Caroline, and he's thinking about everything he's lost. I like the rage that it gives him towards Frollo at the end. I think similar to how Gwen losing her family is important for where Gwen ends up in that movie, I think losing Esmeralda can be important to where Quasimodo ends up. But I think it's the execution and the timing of it that is giving me the ick. I think that it's what I would do as a quick fix is, first of all, the whole bit about her coming from the Romani camp that Gwen was at, scrap it. We don't need it. If it's not going to get addressed, I think she can just be a different Romani person.
Okay. I mean, I kind of like the idea of it tying it back to, I think it gives a character a history, that's tied to our previous films, which I think is kind of one of those things that's like the point of a shared universe.
Yes, but it feels like it's, especially in a movie that Gwen is so closely tied to, it feels like a promise that's not being kept.
Okay.
You know? The other thing is, all I think we need is a heartbreaking scene where after Esmeralda confesses her love for Quasimodo to Victor and Cassie, we just need a scene of Esmeralda and Quasimodo now where she's about to tell him and doesn't.
Okay.
And he knows. He can tell what she's about to say.
But he thinks there will be more time.
He thinks there will be more time, or maybe he doesn't, maybe he doubts himself because he's like, but I look like this, kind of thing. But the point is, she doesn't tell him. So then when she dies in the very next scene, we as the audience realize that this has been taken from them.
Okay. Now, I guess the way that works is that is a tee up when you see them about to have that conversation and then you don't, then you as a wise viewer know she's fucking toast.
Yeah, but it's also that kind of movie.
It is, and that's the reason why I was going to counter pitch myself.
Okay, what's your counter pitch?
What really occurred to me as we read this, bearing in mind this is like my second time reading this script, right? Because I finished it 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Things turn full comic book immediately after that moment.
Yeah.
And that is a whiplash. It's not the whiplash of her death. It's the whiplash from her death to, okay, now Frollo's giving these huge supervillain speeches. We have the rocket launcher.
Yep.
A thing I immediately want to take back is the fucking round of applause when they emerge from the thing. Who gives a shit? Like, I wanted to be a moment for Quasimodo to be like, hey, I can be accepted by people. Yeah, but
I kind of liked it.
But what do they think he's done? I guess he survived a thing. People like that. All right, so maybe I'll keep it.
People survived. I didn't mind it.
Here's what came to mind for how and why to save Esmeralda that I think would serve the story in the things that I want to have happen.
Yeah.
And we can determine what we're going to have happen in the canon after this conversation.
Sure.
Okay, so we have the climax where really at any given time, we only have something for Victor to do or something for Quasimodo to do because there's one villain to fight.
Yeah.
A second objective would fill out this climax nicely. So what we could do, this is how it works on a construction level.
Yes.
We could have, as you say, Phoebus, not as much a shitheel as I currently have him writing, decides to tell one or the other of them. Maybe most interesting if he tells Victor and Quasi is busy fighting little brother upstairs. He tells Victor Esmeralda is still alive and leads him to her. And they have to try and get him up there.
Yeah.
That would be, they go and rescue her and get her out of there. And in the process, we still lose Phoebus because fuck that guy.
Yeah, of course.
Right? But that mechanically makes these climax more interesting. Here's where it serves the themes of the story. One of my weird little objections that I have to my own script here, because he got more evil as I wrote him, is that in the beginning of the story, I had some sympathy for Frollo as a writer, as a guy who really does love his son and wants to protect him, but has a really weird way of wanting to do that. To having him go full, the submission of others is how we touch the face of God or whatever, evil. A way to soften that, if I don't want to cut away his speech, because I love speeches, is the reason why he spares Esmeralda is like, well, no, I'm not going to kill the woman my son loves. He doesn't think he's a monster, right? And he does wants good things for his son. It's a manipulation, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I just need you to do that thing. I don't need you to lose someone you love.
And then he could also be like, and then I get to give my son the gift of his girlfriend back.
It suits his ego in that way.
Yeah.
And that can add to the tragedy at the end. Maybe when Frollo gets killed by little brother, Quasimodo doesn't have his big freak out, you just killed my other dad. And he's maybe even a little bit in that sort of reflexive and very young person way. Someone who has wronged you gets murdered, no matter what your relationship with them is. You say, fucking good, and then has to regret it a little bit. Maybe he finds out that Esmeralda's alive right before Frollo gets killed, and it confuses his feelings more.
Yeah.
And then we still have Esmeralda, and the climax is busier, and we get to work with the theme of how monstrous a person seems is relative to the context in which you know them, which I think helps to underline more of what I didn't get to say too much about the movie, because I don't want it to be super didactic.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Here's my idea. Here's what happens. Phoebus tells Victor that Esmeralda's still alive. Victor is trying to help Quasimodo, right? Their thing plays out as is, but he finds out that she's being held somewhere. He calls Cassie because he knows Cassie's on her way.
She has nothing to do right now in the third act.
He tells Cassie where she is. Cassie enters Notre Dame, rescues Esmeralda, and they get out before it collapses. That way, I like that Quasimodo doesn't know, so he still gets this moment of anger and remembering his love and everything.
And they get a reunion after
he climbs out of the rubble.
Yes, Victor gets his embrace from his family. He gets the embrace from hers. We don't have to do a big kiss, but if we're going pulp mode, fuck it. Music rises, big kiss.
And then Quasimodo goes off with Esmeralda. It gives him someone to be with when he leaves. And also finally a win for William after 200 years of being shit on.
I don't want to change the context in which Quasimodo refuses Victor's offer.
No. I think that should still be the same. But it also gives him we're going to go somewhere else. Not just I'm going by myself.
This is so fucking funny. Have you ever seen the movie The Player?
No.
It's a Robert Altman movie starring Tim Robbins as a Hollywood producer. And it's a super meta riff on showbiz. So in The Player, there's this running bit where you'll see story pitch meetings from screenwriters talking to producers, and the screenwriter will always come with an idea that they think is going to be really revolutionary. It's going to break the paradigm, right? This is real. This is real cinema. This is how things really happen. We're not going to do the hack Hollywood thing. We're going to do it in a way where people really fucking feel it, And then one of two things happens. One is they try to stick to their guns, and the other is you watch somebody, and I think this is Buck Henry in the movie, you watch him gradually adjust his pitch to the feedback of the producer. Keep trying to roll with it. You get to see the idea of how does an idea become a movie, and how do screenwriters have to be completely elastic in order to transform the idea they came in with into something that they're going to buy and be like, there we go, I did it. I sold my movie. No, you didn't. You sold their movie, but at least you're going to get a job and you get paid.
Yeah.
And at the end of the movie, there's one of the movies you hear getting pitched, which is you know what? She's been wrongly accused for this murder, and she's going to be executed, right? This is Julia Roberts probably, and she's going to be executed. And Bruce Willis, the detective, he's got the evidence that exonerates her, and he's running to the execution chamber, and he gets there, and he's too late because that's real, because that's what would happen in real life. And then in the end, you're watching the movie and you get to that scene. And of course, Bruce Willis knocks down the door and there's Julia Roberts. And he pulls her out of the thing. He's like, you knew I'd get you, baby. Big kiss. Music swells. Credits.
Yeah.
That's what we just did to each other. to ourselves.
Yes, we did it to our, and that's this podcast.
Yes.
That's what this podcast is supposed to be.
Really, this podcast has been a really long game reference to The Player, a great Robert Altman film. I recommend anybody watch.
So now that we're here at the end, despite the screenplay not doing it, are we going to do our biggest recanonization ever and save Esmeralda? Is it now canon that Esmeralda is alive and has left with Quasimodo?
We have never pulled a switch like that before, although before a picture lock, we have established that we're allowed to.
We are allowed to, and it does seem to work.
Yeah.
It gives Cassie something to do. It allows Quasimodo to keep his emotional beats, but also, especially right after a Native American werewolf, we let a minor character have a win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know what? I think we go for it. Half of me was like, let's do a Jason Todd thing and ask the audience, but of course they're going to save Esmeralda. There's no point. If we get like a huge backlash being like, no, you can't do that. You have to go with what's in the script. I feel like I'd accept that as a thing being like, hold us to the script to be right. But I think that within the terms of the show we've created, we've made adjustments. This is just kind of a big one.
Yeah.
But you can see it, right? You can see all of it.
I can see it, yeah.
I think the audience can see it too.
Yeah.
I think that makes a really interesting conclusion to this 5-hour episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe?
If we're going to podcast for 5 hours, we're going to give you a huge twist at the end, which is something we've never done at the podcast.
Who was in the bathroom? This ending.
Yes.
Now you know.
And we have saved Esmeralda.
It was Esmeralda.
It was Esmeralda, yes. We have saved Esmeralda we went back and did reshoots. These are our reshoots.
Okay.
You got studio feedback.
Yes.
After the first cut. And now we went back and did reshoots, and Esmeralda's alive.
Okay, well, here's what the mid-credit scene was going to be if Esmeralda had lived.
Okay.
It's going to be her putting together that Gwen is the wolf that destroyed her village.
There you go.
That was what I was going to do with her at the end of this movie if she'd lived. So now we have 2 mid-credit scenes.
There we go.
And that's the other one.
And I love Hunter and Quasimodo being gaming buddies. This also leaves the door open for Quasimodo to potentially join a Dark Legion film.
Yes.
Or anything else.
Quasimodo is a gamer 50% because I wanted to connect to Hunter.
That's great. Maybe Quasimodo will show up in Beneath the Black Lagoon.
That door is open for that.
Yeah. Death's door is open for all. The Forbidden Death's door. All right, we got to wrap up. We have been podcasting all fucking day, and we both have plans tonight.
Yes.
We did not expect it to go this long. It was on the calendar until 4, and it is 6:30. So, picture lock, Esmeralda's alive.
That's the main takeaway from this film.
Honestly, yes.
A thing that didn't happen in
Quasimodo's alive. Quasimodo is Victor's son, William. Brought back. Oh, do we know how William's body didn't decompose over those 200 years?
I think not. Don't worry about it.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I mentioned that there were 2 threads that I wanted to put in the movie that I couldn't. One is I wanted to spend some time in the third act. I actually wrote a couple of flashbacks that I cut because I didn't have a way to close the loop of what it's like for William after he's resurrected, like William and Caroline trying to like resume the work while he is the work.
Yeah.
And like explaining why his body is the way he is, which is the reason why I aged down. What reason why William is 17 when it happens.
Caroline brought him back, but then he died again, right?
No, Caroline brought him back, and then this is the thing that it's absolutely missing from the movie, and it wasn't going to be. I simply ran out of time.
Okay.
I wanted the idea to be one of 2 things, and I was having a hard time deciding, which is why neither of them's in the movie. Either Caroline is immediately horrified by what she's done to someone she loves. And takes it apart, whether or not he's interested in that, whether or not he agrees, because she can't handle it.
Okay.
Or Caroline is excited about the progress she's making in the work, but William is living this life and basically convinces her, 1, I need to die. 2, you can't ever do this to our mother. But I didn't want to also add a death wish to Quasimodo as we know him now, you know?
I do feel like this is an important plot element.
Yes,
here.
it is. But the script is 80 pages long already, Dalton. And we had plenty.
Yeah, no room. But I do feel like before we picture lock, we should iron out where. I guess not.
I don't think it's gonna come back up. But
Quasimodo has been dead for 200 years.
Quasimodo was in a box, dead, not conscious for 200 years. He lived for maybe a couple of years after being put back together.
We just don't know why he died.
We don't know why he died. It's something we can explore later.
Yeah. I don't like that we're leaving that unexplored, but...
well, Dalton, you wanted something cut, okay? And that's what I cut.
Here's the solution I will give is that after her mother died, it is established in the first Frankenstein that he preserved her body parts, or she preserved her body parts using like jars of formaldehyde and stuff. I would imagine, and she did that because since she knew it was possible to bring her mother back, she didn't want to just bury her and let her rot while there was a chance someone could bring her back the way she was. We can just say she did the same with William, that Frollo found William's head preserved, and it was preserved by Caroline for 200 years, and the rest of the body he assembled himself, but William's head was preserved by Caroline after his death.
Okay, and that can potentially solve a problem where, like, all right, if we're going to decide that Frollo really does love his son, then he could give him that spark of life with the idea of having the true paternal love for his creation.
Yeah, or something like that. Because he has to be brought back again anyway, so he has to get that spark again.
I was going to fudge that with the idea that he's already in there, but that is fudging it.
Yeah.
That solves the problem. And again, a recharacterization of Frollo as a complete piece of shit who does at least love his son. That helps. Yeah, the thing about bringing in a script that's not even done baking.
That's
is
the
that
challenge of doing this in 4 weeks.
We get to finish doing this together.
Most movies that are rushed into production have lots of extensive reshoots. So we've done our reshoots now, and we're going to lock it in.
Let's not make a habit of it.
It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
Okay, that was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the 2-week extravaganza House of Frankenstein duology. Catch us here in 2 weeks where Rax King and Amber Rollo of the Low Culture Boil podcast will be joining us to pitch a Dark Universe remake of Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
I am so excited for this episode.
This was Rax's choice. It is a Universal property. She wants to remake it as a horror film.
It's older than we'd like to imagine that it is.
We are going to try to fit Scott Pilgrim versus the World into the Dark Universe. And then 2 weeks after that, the Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies, God willing.
You say that with such defeat as if it's not going to be rad as fuck.
It's going to be rad. I just have a lot of work to do in the next 5 weeks, I guess. And that will only be one episode. And so will Cat People.
Cat People will be one episode.
Yes.
It's a small story. It's a small cast.
There we go.
It's limited in scope and scale.
Thank you for putting up with us for these 5 hours across 2 weeks.
Gosh, we really hope you liked this one.
You've put up with us for many more hours than that. So join us on Patreon for all the benefits, and we will see you next time. And until then,
stay afraid of the Dark Universe.